Courtney and I have always been a part of small churches. I know I grew up in small church. She grew up Methodist. I grew up in was known as a full gospel church, more of a charismatic type church. And then after we got married, we got our roots in a Baptist church before I started pastoring in a non-denominational church. So when people ask me about my background, I like to say that I'm a mutt.
In a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. I appreciate all the different perspectives the different denominations bring to the table, and so we decided to pastor a non-denominational church. Again, I pastored in a small church with a friend of mine for 4 years, and then branched out and started The Haven in 2012. We were meeting in a small group in our home, and on October 14th of 2012, we had our first church service. And there were 18 people that showed up. There were some people that were a part of the whole, the planning the whole time in that small group. And there was also some surprises that showed up that first day, to people from my past that had shown up. And so it was a small group, but it was a good group, and we started from there.
I think one of the strengths of a small church is just being able to do life with other people. You don't get lost in the crowd. People will see you, they'll find you, they hug on you, they love on you. They're checking on you throughout the week. They notice when you're not there. That's really part of the beauty and the DNA of a small church.
I never wanted to be a part of or be a pastor of a mega church per se. That wasn't really on my radar, but I did have a lot of insecurities till I came to a point that I began to embrace who we were as a small church, and started to embrace and understand small church in a completely different way. After meeting in the house for a few months, right at the beginning of 2013, we moved into a high school 9th grade campus, and we started doing setup and tear down on Sundays there. And I would like to say that everything was just amazing that first year, but it was one of the toughest, if not the toughest year in the church's life. The first 2 years were pretty rough. There's a lot of good things that happened. We were going through those trials, but God was still speaking, and that meant a lot to me. Crazy dream I had that basically kind of laid out that first year or two was going to be rough, and just I felt like it was God telling me to persevere and keep going and to be faithful.
Some of the difficulties that come very early on with a small church really can blow the wind out of your sails and make you feel defeated. The beauty of it is that it takes all those trials, and it takes both the strength and the weakness, and the people that show up for you week after week that make it worth it, and that make God's kingdom real.
Into that 2013, that first full year of the church, we had a big decision to make, and we actually ended up moving back into the home. So it wasn't this big, success story of a church. We could have folded at that point, and so we moved back into a house. And that blew the wind out of my sails. I really struggled during that time. Just realizing that those trials have a purpose, and so we kept going. We started meeting back in the home, and within a few months, God was speaking again. And next thing you know, we were doing setup and tear down in Jack's Burgers, and the kids would go a couple doors down to this place that was set up perfectly for a kids ministry, and so we did that for a few months. We had bought a trailer, and we were doing setup and tear down there in Jack's. And then that summer, and it was in the year 2014, I went to bed one night and got deathly ill. Or I was in the hospital for a week. She should have been in the hospital. I was going through some organ failure. We had some strange disease. They never pinpoint exactly what it was. A lot of trials and spiritual warfare going on. Daxton, our youngest, he got sick right after that. And then I come back to church finally after a few weeks, and the manager who was running that Jack's Burgers, he called me and said, "Hey, we need to talk." He was having trouble running the business, and that he was going to have to turn it over to the owner of the whole Jack's franchise. And so I had to go look for a place
Within the week.
within a week. I mean, we didn't even have a place to meet the next Sunday.
Over the course of the day, God opened up a location in Old Town Spring. And that was in one day. So God moves huge mountains for you sometimes that you couldn't foresee transpiring as fast as they do.
And so we ended up meeting, we had the sanctuary upstairs, the kids area downstairs, and that's where we began meeting in end of 2014 and into 2015. Things were good. We had our own, it was pretty good. We had our own little place. And there, for a time, we were actually in a place where we were having worship on Sundays was like literally a MP3 track. It was, words on a screen, and just not the ideal situation, not a place that I ever wanted to be in, but we didn't have a worship leader. And so one of the things that I was praying for, I felt like in the beginning, we didn't start with a good strong core, and praying for that leadership, praying for that core in the church, and we needed a worship leader too. And right when we came to Old Town Spring, God began to answer some of those prayers. Doug and Maggie Horton came with their family, and just at the right time, and he ended up becoming my associate pastor at the time. He took over worship, and she took over the kids, so they were a blessing and an answered prayer. And we were also going through trials still. We were taking care of my dad, who was struggling with cancer. Within a year of each other, the first gentleman that I ever baptized in this church, Mickey Parker, he passed away of pancreatic cancer, and that was devastating for a lot of us and for his family who went here. And then my dad passed away in 2017, and so those were some big trials that we're going through. But right after that, as far as the church is concerned, is when I feel that we started to turn the corner. And it was during that time, it was the first time since we had been in Old Town Spring that I looked at this and said, hey, you know what? This could work. This isn't just a necessity. This is where God really wants us. And started to look at Old Town Spring, though it's a shopping district, looking at it as its own community. And also just the vibe of Old Town Spring really fit what we were doing.
I think it's kind of appropriate that God planted us in Old Town Spring because it has its own personality. It really appealed to this DNA that we had kind of started in the very beginning of people who had some not so glorious chapters of their life and needed God's redemption and needed His love and His grace.
And I've had a lot of my own growth. Obviously, I consider myself a completely different pastor and person than I was 10 years ago when this ministry started. I thought we would jump into this and we would be the church God created us to be, but really we became the church God created us to be. It was a process, and me even becoming a pastor that God wanted me to be, I had some things that had to change in me and be rooted out in me, and a transformation that had to happen in me. And I believe he used those trials in our church to accomplish that. But when we began to turn the corner, was when Luke and Katie, they came around that time, 17, 18, and that's been a huge, huge blessing. Luke is my associate pastor, and his wife, Katie, who leads worship now. That was a huge blessing.
We found out about The Haven because my wife and I, Katie, do a ministry called Destiny Kids, and Scott came with a bunch of folks from the church, and they were volunteering with us. And as I got to know Scott and talked with him, began to see somebody who was really humble, who really loved the Word, and really cared about the people he was shepherding. Really love the sense of community that we have here. I think something I really value about our church is that we aren't focused on just like programs and events, but we really are trying to live out what Jesus said about loving each other and caring for each other as a body. Pastor Scott, from the beginning when I came on board to start working here, we've never focused on becoming big. We've never focused on becoming, the largest church around. We just really wanted to be healthy. We really wanted to care for each other and be a church that's living out what Jesus has called us to do. And, there's nothing wrong with big churches or big things. Those can be great, but to be a part of a church that's healthy and growing and trying to be what Jesus has called us to be, it's really exciting. I think this church has meant, for me and my family, really a place that we can call a haven, a place that can be a refuge. And I think that's what the Haven has been for a lot of people. A place where they can feel safe, a place where they can feel safe to grow and ask questions, We're a place where it's okay to talk about things and wrestle with things together. And I think Scott and Courtney have really done a good job of creating a culture where people can ask the hard questions and grow, and that's a beautiful thing.
I love that the Haven Community Church really is a haven for so many of us. I think that just so many of us have really truly found that coming to the Haven is a safe place to bring our whole selves. I see in the Haven just a lot of people real. They're bringing their whole self there, and so many people who are willing to share their pain and their struggles that they're going through, and then in turn, are not afraid to walk with others going through difficult things as well. And I see that in the Haven Church, and I see that really clearly demonstrated in Scott and Courtney. I see that, that's the kind of people that they want to be, that they want to be people who are safe to come to and be real with. And I just see that character being built into our church, because it's not just Scott and Courtney. I can look around and see so many different people in our church that I can to if I'm struggling with something, and I know that I'm going to receive from them that same acceptance and compassion and humility and prayer and wisdom. And I just think that this community really attracts and fosters that kind of space and that kind of people now, and that Scott and Courtney have done such a good job in creating that kind of environment. And when I envision a healthy church, I envision a family, a community where people are coming together to be the hands and feet of Jesus and to minister to each other. And when I look around at the people at the Haven, that's what I see. I see people ministering to each other, and I just think that's really beautiful. And I think, when I come to church Sunday morning, I'm just so happy to see each of you. I'm just always happy to see that this family came and this family's here and my friends are here and my family's here. And I don't know, that's just a really precious thing. And so I want to commend our church. I want to commend the people here that you love really well. And I think that's amazing. And then I just want to remind us that, like, each one of you, you're needed. You bring something to this body that would be lacking otherwise. You're needed. You have a part here. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that I really just love this church, and I love being part of it, and I'm really honored to be part of it. I feel wanted here, and I want everyone else to feel that too, and I see that they do. And that's just really beautiful.
We are a small church. That's not something to be ashamed of. 90% of churches are under 300, and 80% of churches are under 100 people. And so that's the norm in the world. And so rather than looking at small church as something that's broken, maybe God did that on purpose. And so we've learned to embrace who we are as a small church. We see ourselves as missional out in the world. One thing I've also learned, a lot of pastors give up with there being so many churches that are small. The likelihood of a church making it, to 200, 300, or to a bigger church is the chances are pretty small. And a lot of pastors give up when they struggle to make that numerical growth. And I'm so thankful that God gave me a change of perspective, because I really attribute that to me not giving up, and it allowed me to keep moving forward. And so
It's taught us to hold things with an open hand, to let Him truly change it and make it into the church that He wants us to be, not a church that we want us to be.
Every life is valuable. We think in these big numbers, but the people right in front of you, if you have 3 people in front of you, those lives are valuable. And what I've found is everybody who comes into the Haven has a different story. I tell people that we all have skeletons in your closet. You think you're going through this alone, but we're all going through problems, and you hear these different stories and these different struggles that people have. And those are people that Jesus loves, and he cares about them. He cares about them even if it's just one. And that's what he wants for us as a church too, is to care about one another. And so we embrace the people that are in front of us. And, I'm excited to celebrate 10 years of a church. There's been a lot along that journey, and I'm excited that we've made it, and I just can't wait to see what God is doing through this group, who I think loves each other well. They get the vision, they get the mission of God and through this church and in particular. So I'm excited to see what the future holds here at the Haven.